Hey everybody, Thomas Joseph here. Now, are you one who's been really afraid to make gnocchi at home because you're so intimidated? Or have you tried it before and they've ended up really gummy and tough? Well, today I'm going to share with you a foolproof method in making gnocchi at home, and you will have light and pillowy, delicious, delectable gnocchi each and every time you try to make it. Gnocchi is a potato dumpling, so it's within the pasta dumpling family, but it's primarily comprised of potato. And what you really need to know about this is that you really have to use russet potatoes. If you try using Yukon Gold potatoes or any of the other waxier potatoes, you're going to end up with a totally different outcome. I have 3 potatoes here, but what I'm looking for is 2 pounds of russet potatoes, and that's 3 of these guys. If they're a little smaller, you might need 4. With most recipes, what they'll tell you to do is they'll tell you to boil these potatoes whole, and what I like to do is I like to steam the potatoes. And the reason I'm doing this is because I don't want to introduce any excess moisture. Plunging these into boiling water, some of that water might absorb into the potatoes. And what I want to do is keep out as much moisture as possible, because the more moisture you have in your gnocchi dough, the less pillowy and light they'll be. So they're going to take about 40 minutes here until they're fork tender. So I'm going to let these cook. It's been 40 minutes. Our potatoes have steamed nicely here. They're perfectly tender. And now you have to peel the potatoes while they're nice and warm. I'm going to take just a paring knife here, and you should be able to, with the side of the knife, just peel away the skin. And you want to do this while they're hot because you're going to get the maximum amount of volume and loftiness out of the potatoes once we rice them. And I'm going to rice these potatoes today. You could also use a food mill if you have that at home. The one thing that you want to avoid is using a food processor. What it does is it shears through the potatoes and releases way too much starch and makes your potato really gluey. And again, that's going to give you an outcome you do not want. I'm going to cut this into thirds. Take a small piece of a potato, and I'm using the small disc here of the ricer. It has the smallest holes. There are other sizes, bigger holes, other shapes, but this is the one I'm using today. Drop a piece of your potato in, and all you have to do is press out the potatoes and scatter them around the countertop. I want the potatoes to cool down slightly and dry out. I don't want to stack them on top of each other, because what that's going to do is it's going to create steam, and that steam, if it doesn't have anywhere to escape because it's trapped underneath other potatoes, is just going to keep that moisture inside. I finished ricing all of the potatoes here. They've cooled down to room temperature. So now take your potato and just work it into a mound, as I have here. So this is 2 cups of all-purpose flour plus 2 tablespoons. You want to use this gradually. So dust the all-purpose flour over the top of the potatoes. I'm not going to use all of it. I'm going to save some of it for actually kneading this dough together. So now sprinkle with 2.5 teaspoons of coarse salt. And you might think that sounds like a lot of salt, but you really need this to flavor all those potatoes. I'm going to add 1/8 teaspoon of pepper here. And now I'm going to create a little well in the center, as you would if you were making pasta at home by hand. And I'm going to add my eggs right to the center. These are 2 whole large eggs at room temperature. I'm just going to break them up slightly with the tines of a fork. So the eggs are going to act as a binder to hold everything together. So the eggs go right into the center. And now what you can do is you can start to bring in the sides with the tines of a fork. You want to mix the dough together, but you don't want to overmix or overwork this dough. Remember, guys, you have starch in your potatoes, and if you work starch, it can become gluey. You have flour in here, so if you overwork flour, that can become tough. Like when you knead bread, you're developing the gluten. So you want to be really gentle and quick at this point. So have a little bit of confidence and work fast and quickly, but also pretty gently. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of these. This is my favorite tool in the kitchen. It's one of these bench scrapers. And what you're going to do is you're going to bring the dough together, lightly pressing it. So coming from the outside, pushing up and over, kind of folding in. And what you're trying to do here is create a cohesive dough. You're just gonna quickly but gently work this together into one dough. So you want a dough that is nice and supple and soft. You don't want this to be hard or firm. I'm gonna add a teeny bit more flour here. You can see it's come together. And at this point, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna portion this out into 4 portions, and each of these I'm then going to roll out into a rope about 3/4 of an inch in diameter. And gently roll this out into a log. That's what we're looking for. So in rolling the dough, you can see it's not really tearing apart at any place, and that means that you've mixed it just enough. If it was cracking apart into pieces, that means that you need to kind of work it a little bit more. So this looks pretty good. So you want to cut these into 1-inch pieces. I personally like smaller ones. I think that they're easier to eat. So using a bench scraper, you could use a knife. Just cut these up. And now this is the shaping part. So let me grab a cookie sheet. I'm gonna dust this with some flour just so that they don't stick to the bottom of the cookie sheet. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna take all of these little pieces that you've just created, and this is a gnocchi board. This is a textured board that has ridges in it, and what you really want to do now is take your little piece of dough and you're going to push down in the center and rotate and roll the gnocchi so that it gets ridges. And you might say, well, why are we doing this? What are the ridges for? The ridges will help to grab onto the sauce, giving you a really flavorful gnocchi. So you're going to want to repeat this process. And I like to do it on an angle. I don't like to go straight down. I like to do it kind of off center a little bit. So pushing down with your thumb and turning the gnocchi over like that. You could use, if you didn't have one of these fancy boards, you could use a fork. Really easy, just the tines of a fork. Turn the fork upside down and you're gonna roll this on the back of the fork. You get the idea. It's kind of the same process, but it doesn't look as pretty. So keep going, repeat this process. Now, you can boil these right away. You wanna boil them in well-salted water, but what's really great about this recipe is that you can put this cookie sheet into the refrigerator, and these can firm up in the refrigerator for 1 or 2 hours, or even a few hours before your dinner party or your family gets home from work or school. All right, so now it's time to cook the gnocchi. I have a pot of salted water here that's at a boil. You want to make sure that you aggressively salt the water because you want it to flavor the gnocchi. You want to gently place the gnocchi into the water. They only really take 2 to 3 minutes. What they're going to do is they're going to float up to the top, and that's when you know that they're pretty much done. I usually let them float up to the top and then let them cook for about 30 seconds to a minute until they're cooked throughout. You don't want to overcook them though, boil them too much, otherwise you're going to get chewy gnocchi. So the gnocchi are just starting to float up to the top, and this is when you want to let them cook for about 30 seconds, maybe even a minute more. So it's been about 30 seconds. I'm going to fish these out, and now I'm using a fine mesh skimmer, which I find works the best. You want to use something that doesn't have as much texture because you don't want to puncture the gnocchi, but you guys, it doesn't take much effort to create such a delicious restaurant-worthy dish. So this is some brown butter with sage. Just gonna drizzle this over the top. But again, you guys, you could serve this with whatever you like. It would be really fantastic with pesto in the summertime. This brown butter would be perfect in the fall. Last bit of brown butter here. A little bit of pepper, just a sprinkling, and some salt. And of course, pasta wouldn't be pasta without a little bit of cheese. With a microplane here, you guys. I mean, this smells amazing. I wish you could smell it. There you go, guys. Pillowy gnocchi at home. Just follow some of the tricks and tips that I've showed you today and you will have success. Write to us through the hashtag Kitchen Conundrums. We love to hear from you. We love to know what problems you're having so that we can solve them. Enjoy, guys.